All right, let's get started. We'll get through all the stuff tonight and get you home at a decent hour. You know the good stuff is right. So tonight we have these are the three final topics that we're going to review for the 2010 Comprehensive Plan Update. And once we get through these three topics, we're going to start in, and it'll probably be not tonight, but it'll be maybe the next meeting if we can do it, start looking at the town overall and the properties as to how they're situated in the town. We'll be looking at some properties that may be underutilized, and we'll be looking to you for recommendations for some of them. We're kind of looking at this as more of a fine-tuning more than anything else, because there's not going to be any wholesale rezonings or anything of that nature. I don't think there's any need for that in the community. I think the town board's actions to get a mixed-use district last year, 2017, year before, probably addressed the majority of the issues that were brought up in the 2010 Comprehensive Plan. There are a few properties out there that are kind of in weird situations as they relate to traffic issues now and being in close proximity to other commercial properties that you might want to look at, and acting as buffers from residential to commercial properties, which might mean some kind of multi-use or something of that nature. But generally speaking, there's not that much in terms of having to look at a lot of properties, but the ones that you're going to be looking at are kind of, they're kind of important to us after watching them for the last 10 or so years, and get your impressions as to what you think it should be or shouldn't be. So once we wrap this up tonight, then we'll start getting into the meat and potatoes of the comprehensive plan update and start setting some our own policies and goals for the next one. Okay. So why don't we start with economic opportunities? Excuse me. We have gone over a lot of this stuff in the past several weeks, but we're going to tie it all up and finish it off tonight. We're going to start out with the first policy, and I guess...
Scroll down to the chart.
Yeah, why don't we go down to the chart? There we go. All right, so these were the recommendations for the last committee to you, and you're going to create some of your own recommendations for the next 10 years. So the first one is to promote and support the viability of agricultural operations in the town. Back in 1999, the town board commissioned a committee to do an open space inventory to identify properties in the community that should be preserved and had some type of unique value. That committee went through for a couple of years and identified and weighed each property out and did a matrix to identify the priority listings for each of those properties. Is it related to their importance to the community? In 2001, the committee created an open space plan. The open space plan was in effect for 5 years, and in 2006 the open space committee did an update as they had picked up several pieces of property initially, and in that period of time talked to several property owners who they thought were interested initially in having their property preserved. It turned out they either did not want to or they weren't ready to do it, so they did an update and they reprioritized some of the properties, went after those properties, and as you know, they went through and purchased either the development rights or the properties themselves for preservation purposes. That plan, I don't know if you had a chance to read it or not when we were going through early on talking about the plans that we had in place, but that plan really needs to be updated. There are several properties in the 2006 plan, such as Shadow Pines, Camp Hakamo. The list goes on now because several properties have either been purchased by the town, donated to the town, or been used for other purposes such as housing or whatever the case may be. And in some cases, the property owners are no longer interested in selling the property to the town or donating it, whatever the case would be in that situation. So that plan does have to be updated, and I would strongly urge you to think about that as a recommendation as time moves on here. It truly is something that has to be looked at.
And Jim, can
yes,
you
just
remind us the bond resolution, what the cost was?
Yes.
And are we still have, what, 2 to 3 years?
We will have 3 years left. It was a $10 million bond, as you remember. The town took out a $10 million bond based on the public's support. We do have 3 years left on that bond for full payment off, and we'll be all set, and that bond goes away. So that property, the properties involved in that that area will all be paid off now. So it makes sense that we look at another open space plan to determine whether we want more or we want to keep what we've got. We just made a gigantic purchase, and certainly those bonds, you got to be careful with those bonds. They're kind of a rolling situation, as we talked about early on. You don't want to take on so much debt that all of a sudden your rating starts to drop a little bit, because then you start looking at higher interest rates, that type of thing. And you're kind of burdening the community with some funding that needs to be done that they may or may not be ready for. So we are in a good position now in terms of at least starting to look at that plan, because as Rob says, in 3 years that'll be done with. And maybe in 3 years or 5 years, the community will be ready to look at other properties that we haven't thought of yet.
So is there any grant money available that we could
The
take?
Farmland Protection Bureau is always looking at lands for preservation, particularly agricultural lands, so that would be an option. There are other funding opportunities, the CFA grants that the state puts through. That would be an opportunity to buy additional land, park grants, that type of thing. So there are options out there. You have to apply for them. They are usually matching grants. So whatever the land's going to be, we're probably going to pay 50% of it, and the grant would maybe, or some grant you pick up might pay the other 50%. If you go out to bonding again in 3 years or 5 years, then you would just take on the responsibility of paying the bond off of whatever you pick up. Yeah, it's
Just,
not,
could you repeat, what was the name of the agency you said, in response to Charles' questions about grants? You said CFA, and you said the Farm
Bureau.
Farmland Protection.
Farmland Protection Grants.
Farmland Protection Grant.
Yep, they're out there all the time, and they send us information all the time. We're going to talk about different agencies that send us stuff, but we get a lot of stuff on a regular basis as to notifying us as to what's available and what isn't.
But I think, and through that first plan, we identified or followed through with on preserving or doing purchase development rights, easements, whatever it may be, on over 1,000 acres of land.
Right, we picked up about 1,000 acres of property on there.
Not all of it's under our control, but the purchase development right doesn't mean we bought it, it just means we have rights over it, someone else still owns it.
Yeah, you're not going to have a developer coming in and developing the site for a housing tract or something of that nature. And we have the first right of refusal on those properties if we want to buy them. So that might mean, in a few years we want to look at that option, depending on the situation.
Or if they're trying to sell.
Right. In many cases, they don't want to for one reason or another. In many cases, we want to be careful because in some cases, there's no pressure for development on the properties anyways. They're out in the middle of nowhere. We've talked about the limited sewer capacity in the town. So there's not going to be a big question for people to go out in East Pennfield and develop housing tracts if there's no sanitary sewer to service them. So.
Is there a kind of ballpark, say, percentage difference of what you would pay for development rights versus what you would pay outright for the land?
Yes.
And
Yeah, it's
kind of,
a different.
What's that kind of ratio roughly?
I can't remember offhand. I want to say 80%, but I'm not quite sure. The problem is you're not really buying their land. They still have the
Yeah,
right
I
to make
know.
a profit off of it in
Right.
terms of agricultural use, whatever the case may be. It does give us the ability at some point in the future, though, to have the ability to buy it if we want it. But again, it's not going to cost that much future-wise because we already have the right of non-development on the site. So.
Okay.
There's also a difference in cost of what, we've talked before, what we can pay, what an appraised value of the property is versus what a developer can pay. Is competing against, developer can afford to pay more money for a property than what we can as far as an appraisal. So that's always, a challenge as well. As farmers are selling their land, they're obviously trying to make as much money. That's their retirement if they're selling off property. So that's always a challenge as well.
Talking about renewing of the agricultural district within the town. The town's always been supportive of the agricultural district, the Northeast Agricultural District. It's been in place probably most of the time, if not all the time that I've been here, so we're going on 40 years. And the program is really a nice program. It provides tax incentives to those who participate in it. It also has penalties if you are in the program and you want to sell your land to a developer, you have the right to do it. But that land now you have to pay back a cost what was given to you as part of that process, and it's prorated out in the number of years you've been involved in the program, that type of thing.
This is the ag district now.
And here's our ag district. It's in that beige color. Thanks to my cohort across the way here, Doug, he did some research for me. I noted that in 1999 there were 5,650 acres in the ag district. There are currently approximately 7,250 acres in the ag district, so it's been increasing in size, even though the number of true farmers has been decreasing in use. The farmers that we do have, the few that we do have, are very active, and they do lease most of the land out in East Penfield that is in agricultural use. So kudos to them, because obviously there aren't that many people interested in farming anymore, especially on that level. But you get several guys out there that are really doing the yeoman's work to keep that land in agricultural production, and it keeps the continuity of that area intact and the character intact. So there is an increase in the ag district, so it's still pretty strong. You look at it, you can't see it here, but in relationship to Parrington and Pittsford, it's probably 3 or 4 times bigger than Parrington,
You got the whole map.
and probably twice the size as the one. Well, if you add it all together, I'd say twice the size as that in Pittsburgh. So it's in great shape compared to some of the areas in the county. And you can see it's the northeast quadrant, that's the yellow one, and the northwest quadrant is everything out on the west side of the county. So you see places like Ogden and Parma are still pretty strong, and obviously it's starting to fade away as you get in the ring around the city. But it's still pretty strong in Penfield. And we've been very supportive of it and continue to be so. And we'll work with those farmers to do what we can to help make them viable for as long as we can. We'll talk a little bit about that. The town does interact with its farmers. We don't have as many as we used to. We still are very close to all the farming families in town. I would say guys like Dave Woodward and Jim Bauman and a couple other guys, they're kind of like the backbone of the farming community in Penfield. Whenever they have issues, we want to talk to them about it, make sure we can help them out if we can. The town has done things such as worked with Wickham Farms to relocate their business from 250 over to Sweets Corners Road. I think the town board worked with them, the planning board did, and staff. It was kind of seamless, and it worked out fairly well for them. They have, there's a little group called Sunscape over on Creek Street. It's not really little, they're actually quite an operation, but they've got a farm market on Creek Street as you're between Embry and Plank.
Yep.
And a very nice farm market. They saw a need to relocate their farm market back off the road because it was becoming kind of a traffic issue over there on busy days, particularly in the fall. So you might have noticed recently they have relocated that back further. They're going to work with us and the County of Monroe to redevelop their parking area and try to confine parking or confine access to and from the site so that it's just not all haphazard and kind of creating a problem for everybody out there. So that'll happen in the springtime. So things we can do to help them is it's kind of a pleasure to help them do it, to see them stay viable. Explore opportunities for increasing the profitability for farming in the town. I talked a little bit about that. As I say, we work with them to do what we can. We do not charge building permits for true agricultural buildings. We do inspect them to make sure they're built properly, but agricultural buildings such as barns, hoop houses, silos, those types of things, we do not charge permits for. And I don't think a lot of other towns do at this point either. The ag and market laws are really quite strong and very supportive of the farming community in the state of New York. So as a result, we have to be aware of those and make sure that we're not doing something that's contradictory to that law.
Jim, on the cover of today's D&C, there was a reference to something that has been, that I was reading about elsewhere as well, with respect to New York State easing up on the growing of hemp and some other stuff like that. Obviously, these are hot crops to be growing now, or hops and so on and so forth. Is there any town restriction on what can or cannot be grown in Penfield?
No, we follow the state law.
Okay.
The state has done a lot in recent months to ease up on farmers to allow them to be more productive in other fields.
Mm-hmm.
You saw it in the last couple of years, things like cider mills and hard cider, distilleries, those types of things are all permitted activities now under the state law. And we work with the state to make sure that we're compliant with that. When we look at businesses like that, we look at things like site plan approval issues, such as do they have adequate parking? Are they going to create traffic or noise impacts? Are they going to create impacts to adjacent neighbors? Are they going to create drainage problems? Those kinds of things. But the actual use itself is actually a permitted activity in the state now, so it's a permitted activity in Penfield.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Is there ever an instance where something would be permitted at the state level but would not be permitted here?
We are wrestling, not so much of an agricultural use, but we're wrestling right now with what's recently happened with like CBD oils and those types of things. We haven't quite caught up to that yet, and the town board, I'm sure, is going to be talking about that over the next several months to figure out, you know, to what level are we going to be comfortable with. We had a situation where a local doctor wanted to open up a medical marijuana referral business. There was no transaction of marijuana on the site, medical marijuana. But that, we weren't really quite there for that yet, even because we're not quite sure how to handle, you know, what their processes are, let alone ours. So, you know, that's the problem with zoning, is you have to catch up to the technologies and what's happening in the world, and it takes a little while to do that. Generally, you do it. We did it with cell towers. We've done it with solar energy. But it takes a while to catch up to that because you're just not used to dealing with it. But those are kind of the things that are coming forward now that we have to start looking at. You got to remember, a lot of this was done 10 years ago or even 12 years ago when certain things were important and other things weren't. Back then, the idea of roadside stands and farm markets was really, really important. A lot of people were interested in it. There aren't as many farm markets as there used to be in Penfield for one reason or another. Obviously, there's a lot of competition out there with Lowe's, with the Home Depot. They're all selling flowers and stuff. And then you've got other ones that were viable 25 years ago for one reason or not are not viable now. People get older and they don't want to develop. They don't want to, you know, operate the market. Other ones pop up on busier streets. We had, you know, some of them are still viable in the sense that they need help, such as they're relying on the ability to do snow plowing and lawn mowing and landscaping as part of that component, and they probably couldn't make it without that. So a lot of guys are now buying these farm market stuff to, you know, for that purpose. There are still a few very viable farm markets. Whenever we have issues with farmers who say, hey, I'd like to look at the ordinance, maybe it's not being as positive for us as it could be, we certainly sit down with them. Every time we do a revision with the farm markets, we always bring in several farmers as part of the committee to give us recommendations. The last one we did, I worked with Jim Ballman and Larry Grossman when he owned Grossman's Grossman's business over there on 250. And I also had Dave Woodward. Dave Woodward is kind of like a staple here. Anything agricultural, we always invite Dave in and get his opinion because he's been in the business a long, long time and knows every aspect of it. So right now, the farm markets, it's kind of interesting because the farming industry in New York State is kind of booming again, but we haven't had a lot of interest in new farm markets. I think Sunscape's actually our newest one, but we've got some, you know, some old reliables such as Ballman's, Brockalows over there on Penfield Road.
Shoots.
Shoots, Gentles. There's still several of them out there, and they seem to be hanging on there pretty well. Got a good following. But we're not seeing a lot of interest in putting in a lot of new farm markets up. So I think what's happening is the land is becoming so expensive, and you got to be in a busy area. You've got to be on a main road where people see you. I've got a couple that are not on main roads, and they're just desperately hanging on because they just, I mean, they've got good businesses, but they're just not getting the people that they need to.
What about a farmer's market, a true farmer's market, like in Brighton?
Like
and
you bring in
Rockport?
everybody into it?
Right, I know that very briefly there was when they tried at Panorama Plaza, which, like in the Home Depot parking lot, which was kind of a really bad place for it, for starters.
Yep.
And I don't know that there was much awareness raised in the community, so it lasted maybe 2 summers with hardly any participants.
Yep.
But
It's a good segue question, because I was
Okay.
going to bring up the fact that we're going to be meeting, I think next week, with representatives from Baytown Plaza.
Mhm.
They've got a big green space up there where they took out the old Tops area. They want to conduct a community farm market for Penfield Webster. And they're going to be meeting with us to identify how to lay it out and then try to get contacts for people to see if they're interested in participating as well, which we'll be doing with them. So yeah, I agree. It'd be nice to have one. You know, you got the CSA programs, and Wickham's running a CSA program. So there's a lot of interest in
Yeah,
farm to
local.
table.
Yeah.
So we're going to be working with them to see if they can all participate in that program at the farm market as well.
Might be nice to tie some of the restaurants in too.
Bakeries.
Yeah, exactly.
We're down to B, increase commercial and industrial tax base. As you all know, Penfield has it's in a situation where it's not on a main road, it's not on an interstate, it's not on the thruway like Victor and even Greece or even Webster with 104. I mean, those are busy areas for people to put up businesses. We are not in that kind of a situation. We're kind of a secondary market, in some cases a tertiary market, where they know that if they come here, the community is going to support them, so they're going to do okay. But you don't see the big type operations like in the restaurants. You don't see the Olive Gardens, and you don't see a lot of those businesses coming in, at least yet, because they're looking for cars on a street that is generating 50,000 cars a day. And there's no place in Penfield, although you wouldn't believe it, there's no place in Penfield that generates 50,000 cars a day. The most we have is on Penfield Road, which at the Four Corners is 36,000 a day. But you go out to Watson Road, it's 9,000 a day. So it just gives you an idea of, things are coming in from Fairport, they're coming in from Webster, but they're not so much coming in from the eastern side of the county. That being said, though, we have 13, as I've said several times here, we have 13,000 parcels in Penfield. It's a bedroom community. 92% of the town is zoned for residential use. Obviously, the people that live here like that. That's why they're all here. It's attractive to them to come here for the schools and recreation in the residential setting. 8%, or about 380 or 385 parcels are zoned for commercial and industrial use. That's not a lot of property considering how much, I don't know if you can go to the zoning. It's not a lot considering how many properties in town are zoned for residential. Of those properties, there's a high demand for those properties because there aren't many open spaces to it. We generally have about a 93% occupancy rate. You see some outstanding properties that are quite visible along the road that say, how come they can't fill those up? And there are reasons why they're not being filled. Obviously, we talked about contamination issues. We talked about the type of zoning that you want. There are certain areas where people want to put car washes on corners of property. We don't want car washes on the corners of property because car washes need staging areas and they need queuing areas to get people in and out, especially in the springtime when everybody's trying to get the car washed on the same day. It's not safe to put those kinds of operations on the corners.
Or we have sanitary sewer issues.
And some of them we don't have sanitary sewers to service some of these properties. So it becomes limiting as to what you can and can't do. For us, though, really the big thing is not so much that people don't want to be here because they do, but there are limitations to the property. We just mentioned a little while ago Don Scott's property. Don Scott's on septic, right? That property's on septic. The property across the street's on septic, but it's also just signed off as a non-contaminated site. We have several contaminated sites in town that are causing people headaches in terms of trying to buy them and redevelop them. The one at Browncroft and Blossom is the number one in my mind right now. We have done a good job over the last several years of cleaning up a lot of them. And we're hoping that the one down across from Panorama Plaza that's been sitting there vacant for the last several years, that did receive approval by the planning board to get it, put a new office space on there, but they have not been signed off yet by the DEC, so it's kind of limiting as to what you can and can't do. In any case, I think over the years, the town board and the planning board have been great about getting people into these sites. The planning board obviously looks at most of the town. The town board looks at the Four Corners and Empire Boulevard. The Four Corners got there's a lot of limitations because there's not as much parking as people would like, and the buildings are kind of historic in nature, and you don't want to tear them down, and you can't blow them out to make them bigger. So people that come there because they like the area. The area does have a lot of visibility. As I said, 36,000 cars a day. But what happens is they either get really popular, and they get so popular that they have to leave there because they need more space, or they stay there for a while and they're still popular, but they stay at the level they were when they kind of came there, which is nice for us because once you get a good tenant in there or a good property owner who does take good care of the property, you want to hold on to them if you can do that. All the properties down there, you want to get everything in the zone properly, but you're more concerned about them maintaining the properties over a period of time and making sure that, especially the older historic ones, are well maintained and in good position to be around for another 50 or 100 years if they can be. So working with the property owners on a regular basis to make sure they're kind of all moving forward. We've been very lucky. There's very, very few that haven't taken good care of their property, especially under adverse circumstances, because you get a lot of traffic down there. But we've been very lucky with the number of people down there that have been successful. There are 6 districts. We're not expanding any of the districts. We just created the new mixed-use district, as you know. Mixed-use district, the town board determined that it did not want to see more big box development outside of the existing districts that are out there. The new district, the new mixed-use district, is going to provide for both recreational, residential, and commercial uses, but not big box or even drive-through development. So it's basically designed to accommodate those that are living in the area and those driving by. The big districts are, as you might guess, is up on Empire Boulevard, the stretch along Empire Boulevard. Most people think Empire Boulevard is in Webster. It's not. All of Baytown Plaza and all the properties north of Baytown Plaza till you get to the Dunkin' Donuts. Dunkin' Donuts is the first property in Webster. Everything up to it and all the way down to Empire Boulevard and the flats down there, that's all Penfield. The town of Penfield is just recently approved a sign package for Baytown Plaza, and as part of that, we're trying to brand that area as being Penfield, and they are going to insert the town of Penfield in their signage. When you drive by, you'll see Baytown Plaza in Penfield, New York. So we're trying to bring that all back together again so people understand they're actually in Penfield and not in the town of Webster. The other area is obviously Panorama. Panorama is going to experience some growth. There's some property down there behind the Thermo Fisher plant that was recently purchased. It's about 50 acres or so. See where it says LI, but there's even more area down there behind that. That area is going to be developed into a office park similar to Linden Oaks. It's going to be Class A office space. They're preparing a plan right now. They just submitted a plan to us actually identifying how they might lay it out. They're looking at people to try and invest in it at this point in time and purchase different pods for it. So that's going to be an interesting development as time goes on, but you might even see that happening as early as later this year or early next year, depending on how they make out with their potential clients.
Yeah, this Thursday, the planning board's actually having a sketch plan for that project. Just in case anyone's interested in watching or attending.
As Mark noted earlier, a lot of that area down there is in a floodplain. All of Panorama Plaza is in a floodplain. Most of the area that you see is in pink in that area right there is in a floodplain. So we, obviously if they were to come in today, we would be hard pressed to approve development down there. You might not see that happen the way it did back in the 1950s and 60s, but it is there. It's valuable property now. So as it starts to get redeveloped, we have to be cautious about how we do that. They are still going to have to elevate out of the floodplain, so it helps them with their flood insurance. It helps us because it mitigates some flooding activity. They have to be very careful about how they create ponding areas to accommodate excess flows, or if they're going to elevate and not create ponding areas, how they're going to help offset the flooding situation as it might take place in that area. And we know that it does flood in that area. The other area that's important to us is the one at 250 and 441. That's becoming a very popular area. There isn't that much left, and we're going to be asking you to look at some of the properties in that area out there to get a feel for what you think in terms of whether we should allow them to be incorporated into the business district or stay residential. It should be a lively discussion because it's not as easy as you would think that it would be. And we'll talk about that when we get to them. Also, there's a lot of activity with office space in Penfield now, all of a sudden, because there isn't that much left for retail use. Office is very popular. We're getting a lot of demand for medical, especially from URMC and from Rochester General, RGH.
Mm-hmm.
So we get a lot of dentist office for some reason. I don't know why we all need dentist office. I'm looking at everybody's teeth. They all look pretty good. Thank you.
George is handing out candy.
George is acting as an agent for all the dentists in Penfield.
I can either confirm or deny that.
You're getting compensated justly for it, I'm sure. But there is a lot of interest in the medical community here, which is kind of a good thing because it's a stable community, and certainly URMC is it's the new Kodak in terms of being an employer for the Rochester area. So We are seeing a lot of that, and it's still a very viable community. It's still a residential community, though, and we've got to be very careful what we do in terms of offsetting, or creating impacts to the residential community. So those are the big ones for that area. Why don't we go back? Support changes to the town's existing land use pattern that are consistent with the future land use plan. Obviously, they're referring back to the land use plan that they did back in 2010. I think we've done that as a group. I don't think you've seen anything crazy happen in 10 years that would throw us off the pattern that we created for that comprehensive plan update. None of the six districts have experienced any real expansion area or have changed in any great detail. Some of the highlights have been down in the Panorama area. We had the new hotel constructed, which I thought was a real benefit to the community. The hotel that was already there, the courtyard was upgraded and it was remodeled recently. It's a fine facility. But you haven't seen anything crazy happen that would be out of sorts with what the recommendations were in 2010.
And you're seeing those B&R properties starting to get developed that were rezoned after the comp plan came out.
Yeah, that's a good point. The town board had to wrestle a couple of years back with two different areas of town. One was along 441 over by Harris Wayland Park Road. Those properties were all single-family residences that were really not being well maintained after a period of time because people were getting out of them what they put into them. They did petition the town board to ask to go to a commercial zone. The town board selected a business, not a retail zone versus a commercial retail zone. They were concerned about things like tattoo parlors and vape shops and all sorts of goofy things going in adjacent to the school complex and the park. They settled on a business, not a retail zoning district, which allows for all sorts of office, banks, daycare facilities, things that are,
9 to 5s.
and complementary to the school area and the park. So it took a while for that to take off, but it has been taking off. You see there's a new dental office being built at 2100. Dr. Rengen built his facility right on the corner of Harris Wayland Park Road. The properties along the east side there have all pretty much been developed out. There are 2 units left, but one's purchased, and the other one's kind of waiting to see what's happening with the other one. But I think you'll probably see that all those units finally redeveloped at some point in the future here. And there is start being some interest now, according down there on the west side. The one green space adjacent to the B&R district is a New York State group home. That is probably always going to be a New York State group home, or at least while we're all around. So that kind of acts as the barrier or the border, if you will, or the buffer from the rest of the residential zone down the street. It basically stops the domino effect of everybody trying to get their houses rezoned to commercial use. Because a lot of people do take very good care of their properties along Penfield Road. It's amazing to me, with all those cars going by every day, but they take fabulous care of those properties, and it's great that they do that. So this is the big area. And then the last one that I want to just touch upon is the Browncroft Corners area. Over on Browncroft Creek and Blossom. As I said, the bane of my existence right now is trying to get that gas station cleaned up, and it's been tough. We're still working on it. Keep working on it until we get it done.
There's a pizza parlor down there, so.
We got that cleaned up. That was a big deal because that was going on forever.
And the pizza's not bad.
I haven't been there yet. I'm embarrassed to say, but I will probably get there as quickly as I can. There's no intent to expand that operation in any way. What you see there in yellow and in pink is basically that district. There's no effort on anybody's part to expand that district. We actually did a survey a couple of years ago with the people living along Browncroft in the gray area, seeing if they were interested, because we thought what was happening out on Route 441 was going to happen here, but again, they said they didn't want to lose their residential character, and it's fine.
Jim, where does you kind of explained to us where Penfield ends up in the sort of the Webster or Ronda
Yeah, can we go up to
zone. Where does it end on the East Rochester side?
Oh, all right.
By like that
I'm going to stay here, yes. If you're heading up Panorama Trail South, and you get to the Big Oak driving range, or you start to see it, some of the Big Oak is still in Penfield, as you can see there. The green space is in Penfield, which has got me a little bit alarmed because I know there are people out there always looking for property, and I'm sure that they would be looking to develop that site. That property is zoned, I think, limited industrial, if I'm not mistaken. So there are some, there are some things that you really can't do.
No, that's residential.
Is it residential?
Across the street where the hotel is.
Yeah,
and
so you're gonna have, you obviously would have somebody coming in that would be interested in developing that site. I don't get too many calls about it, because people think that it's in East Rochester. I think they're probably calling East Rochester a lot. The access to it is in East Rochester, so that helps a little bit. But I think that what's happening is I think that they do well enough that I don't think that there's interest on their part to have it developed at any time in the future.
Ecor's is the last property on the other side,
Yeah.
and that new Linden, or whatever that office
new
park
sheriff's
is.
department is?
Oh, okay.
That's the first property in East Rochester.
East Rochester,
Yeah.
okay.
Actually, that's Pittsford.
Barrington.
No, can we go back to the,
Pittsford there.
Is it Pittsburgh?
Wow.
Pittsford, Barrington, and East Rochester and Penfield all kind of come together in a
A weird formation.
weird little point. We always get the question, why can't sidewalks extend further down Panorama Trail towards East Rochester?
We don't own it.
There's little wedges between like 4 different towns that all come into that exact area. So to get 4 towns to come together to put a sidewalk in little bits and pieces is kind of been difficult. So we've taken it as far as our town goes, and then it
so
kind of
can
stops.
we go back to the question on the Creek
Actually
Street
showed it, but
Blossom?
Yes.
So, you talked about there was a discussion at some point, maybe during the 2010 comp plan, to the local residents' desire to increase that. When was the last time that was revisited?
Probably right around the time that what drove it was the fact that there was interest on the part of an individual to develop the property just to the east, I'm sorry, just to the west of where MRB Group used to be, the office building there. And in order to do that, they would have had to rezone that property to accommodate the request. And we were concerned that people would be concerned about the encroachment into their residential properties, particularly the next door neighbor, but then it got to a point where it wasn't difficult to ask everybody else on that stretch to see if they wanted it or not. And we did do that, and overwhelmingly they didn't want to. Now that was a while back, and we probably should look at that again as an option. That might be one of your areas that you want to look at, and we may have to do some surveying on that as part of the process. There are other areas in town just like that. I don't want to get into them just yet because I don't want to get you thinking about things that you shouldn't be thinking about yet until we get this done. So,
No, just.
but we will look at
because-
that.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously, I live close enough that I drive by there a lot.
Yeah.
I got thinking, okay.
Yeah, you got the brown house and the white house that was in front of the old MRB building. Those are the last piece in LB, and that's been looked at several times, but those are small, very
Yeah, but
small parcels to
if
try
you look
to.
at the 2 large parcels right next to it, and then you've got 3 smaller ones encapsulated inside of those,
Yeah.
your mind starts to tick around that. I mean,
Yeah.
Where would you draw the line,
Where
or how
would you
far
draw
does that
the-
go? You got the one house that sits back quite a bit from the
well,
road.
I'm gonna go ahead and defer to Jim's. We'll talk about it later.
Well, just thinking about that though, the thing you think about is, all right, these poor people have got 24,000 cars a day going by their house. We haven't had a lot of complaints about it. I mean, they take good care of their property. We don't have very many, if any, violations down there. But if you start thinking about, should we rezone that, the things you have to think about is, number one, not everybody's gonna leave at the same time. So there are gonna be some people that are the residential and wanna stay residential, they're gonna have to live with non-residential uses. Secondly, there's a lot of vehicles going through there right now, but if you bring commercial activities to it, you might bring more commercial, you might bring more vehicles to it as well. So you gotta weigh everything out kind of to see how it's gonna balance off for everybody.
Oh, yeah, I mean, there's lots to the equation, but.
And then, of course, then you have problems too that we've run into, particularly on the one on Penfield Road, where you have smaller lots in some cases, and they want to convert that into office space, or they want to tear down the building and put another office there, but there's not quite enough parking and setback for everything. Kind of got to wrestle it out, and we'll have to look at all these areas in great detail to determine whether or not they've been working on it.
otherwise they're asking for about 6 to 7 area variances every time they go in.
Every time they have
Exactly.
that.
Although it's tough because we recommended that they become B&R, and we recommended that the boards work with them, so we get there sometimes, but the parking does become an issue.
All right, we'll go back. Number 3, provide business community with information regarding tax incentives and other programs. We certainly do that. We spend a lot of time with the business community. If there's anybody building something new, or they own a property, they want to put more than $10,000 of improvements into it in a year or two, The state has a tax incentive called the 485-B exemption, which provides them with the ability to keep their tax structure where it was for a 10-year period with small increments getting back up to where it should be. It's kind of an incentive to let people improve their property without just hammering them with a brand new full assessment on the property. It's a nice feature. A lot of people take advantage of it. The other thing we do is we try to hook them up with the Monroe County Department of Economic Development. They're a very, very strong group down there. They have a lot of programs. I actually brought one of the brochures that they have. You can pass it around and look at it. But they have a ton of programs for small businesses, medium and large-sized businesses in the county. And they do a lot in They do a lot in Penfield. They've done a lot of the businesses you've seen go into Penfield over the last couple of years. They've been instrumental in helping them through that process. They were helpful with the K2 brewery. They were helpful with the Baytown improvements, that type of thing. The town board and the town staff are not real supportive of being involved in what they used to call comida. They don't call it that anymore. But what it does basically, it gives them incentives, tax incentives, which kind of take away from our ability to just keep our taxes where they are. They get an incentive that helps them out over a long-term period. The town board's been very strong about not having that happen because they want everybody to pay their own share. If you want to come to Penfield and be a viable business, God bless you, we hope you do. But all of us around this table and the other 36,000 that are with us shouldn't have to bear the burden of that. So the town board's been very strong on not doing that. That being said, the Monroe County group has been helpful to these people. It does not affect our tax structure, but it may affect your county taxes depending on the situation. That being said, they do bring business to Penfield. They do bring money to Penfield, and you know, they've been successful at it. So, but Penfield's been pretty tight about it, not making those kind of allowances for this business. Number 4, increase business owner awareness of government agencies and programs. We just talked about that. We do everything we can to make sure that the business operators in town know what their options are. And we do a lot of work with the Chamber, who's very instrumental in helping them do that as well. We are partners with the Chamber, and we spend a lot of time with members of the Chamber. Getting into that, number 5, encouraging cooperation between local business organizations. As I said, we at one time, 10 years ago when this was done, the Penfield Business Association was a different operation than the Penfield Chamber. There were 2 separate operations, which was driving people crazy because they didn't know which one to join or who was doing the most for them. And after a period of time, they were able to combine into one effort. They're a very strong organization now. They do a lot of things, a lot of networking for their members. Whenever anybody new comes to Penfield for a commercial activity, I always recommend that they contact the Chamber. I've got their application form. I put it in their packet as part of the zoning board application or the town board application. Because they do a good job. We've had a little cupcake shop open up on Empire Boulevard. I strongly urged her to do that because they have parties all the time too, and they usually use their members to provide the services for those parties. So, you know, it's a strong organization. I'm glad that it is one organization now. It makes it a lot easier, and we do a lot of work with the Chamber. Just recently, the Chamber just had a new president, Marie Zinti, who's actually on our Zoning Board of Appeals, and she's very active and she's very busy, and she was able to hook me up with the Rochester Chamber of Commerce, who's interested in helping people in Penfield as well. So we've got another level of people now working with our business group, trying to help them become successful. They have a lot of programs, especially for minority businesses, women's businesses. They put on a lot of seminars to teach people how to run their businesses properly. They're a real asset, and I think the people in Penfield are really going to benefit from them. I put them up with a couple of ladies I know that have businesses that could use their support, and I think it's worked out pretty well. So thanks to Marie Cindy for that. Continued business development efforts, that is an ongoing daily business for us. We are constantly trying to work with real estate agents to put people in vacant spots, trying to redevelop old spots that need to be redeveloped without compromising the integrity of the business district, or putting things in that are not similar in nature to the district. But that's an ongoing business for all of us. I mean, I'm kind of with it every day, but everybody here is constantly dealing with people coming in, and we are very, very popular. They are here every day trying to find some spot where they can either open a new business or redevelop an old site or build something brand new. So it's been very busy for us over the last couple of years.
Jim, can you just address the streamlining process?
Yeah, I was actually going to do that, because down later on it says, what is the government doing to help? But,
And you can do it later.
well, I can do it now if you want.
We're going to bring that up or not.
So let's do it now and just get it over. It's a good segue. There were several businesses coming into the Four Corners in particular over the years, little office uses that were taking over other office uses, or little, massage therapy groups or whatever, some type of medical operation. And it was painful for them to have to come in, because they'd have to wait a month or two to go to a public hearing to get in. The town board basically said, this is kind of crazy, the same intensity of use. So they created a set of guidelines for people saying, if you are the same intensity of use, you're not creating parking issues in the Four Corners, and you're kind of a business is a quiet business, we will work out something called a streamlined process, where they bring them in to the town meetings, usually a work session. They spend about 15-20 minutes with them, getting a feel for who they are, what their intensity of scope is, what kind of a potential impact they might have on parking issues in the Four Corners. And if they find them to be compatible with all the issues that are non-issues, they will then give them a streamlined approval process, which has been a big help to a lot of them, because a lot of them are waiting to open up. And it's hard when you're a one-man operation or a one-woman operation, and you got to wait 2 months to get in when all your financing and everything is in place, and you still can't get into that property. So that's really been a godsend for a lot of them, and the town board's done a good job over the last couple of years. We've had situations where they have said, no, you're not an appropriate use. We've had a couple of restaurants come in that were going to generate a lot of traffic, and they didn't know how to handle their parking facilities. So they said, if you want to come in, you got to go through the whole process, and they've done that. But it's worked out well. Operation like Joe Gatz, he did come in, even though Cha-Cha's was there before. He had to come in and go through that process just to make sure that he was not going to impact the other neighbors in the Four Corners in that quadrant with parking issues, and it did work out well. So that streamlining process has been a big help to a lot of people in the Four Corners. Let's just jump down to ensure that there's adequate infrastructure in place to accommodate new commercial and industrial operations. And then the first one is implement recommendations in the EDAP. That is the Economic Development Action Plan that was prepared back in 2008. It's on your list of documents. You may or may not have read it. I don't want you to spend a ton of time on it, because a lot of the things that were recommended in 2008, before our whole world kind of collapsed there with the housing industry, a lot of them are not as viable as they were back then. A lot of things that have occurred, like a lot of recommendations regarding big box development, which we're not doing anymore. Amazon wasn't in existence back then, and it is now, so that's kind of taking its toll on a lot. So I don't expect you to spend a lot of time, if any, on that, but there are references throughout the document about the economic development plan, and I think that if anything, we might want to look at that plan at some point in the future and really determine how viable it is, if it needs to be updated or not. But in any event, you see that recommendation in several places here, and it might be outdated at this point in time. But there is, as it relates to telecommunications and any type of technology, everybody at the table here can attest to the fact that the telecommunications industry is here all the time, looking to upgrade, looking to add on to, looking to create new towers. They just put a repeater tower in. You probably don't even notice it, but they put one down in Panorama right next to the bank at the plaza down there. It looks just like a telephone pole. We had to wrestle with that for a period of time, because we've had other people that wanted to come in and put 120-foot towers between a curb and a sidewalk.
I noticed that.
And you might have picked up on that if it happened. We are in the process of creating a new zoning ordinance to regulate that. Right now, we would probably not approve it in any case because of the amount of utilities in place between the road and the sidewalk. But these new towers and the new technology are basically telling us these repeater cell towers are going to be the thing of the future. You're not going to see a lot of high towers here anymore, but they are still out there. There's still co-location taking place, and we have to address that. But it's not so much us identifying, maybe this, again, 10 years ago was a long time as it deals with the telecommunications industry, but it's not so much us identifying hotspots or us identifying this or that. It's really them coming out with their engineers saying, hey, we need something here. We're coming to the town to apply for it. So they're in here a lot. I'm sure Rowan will tell you the same thing. We do the same thing everywhere. They're basically just trying to create this national network, and they know where to put everything to get it to where it has to be. And it's just a function of us working with them to get to where they want and where we want to be without compromising.
And that's all, the carriers are all doing that separately, right? They don't come to you collectively and say.
No, you're right, they do not. They, what they do is a lot of them lease towers out, and they'll come to us and they'll allow for co-location because we encourage co-location at every bend. A lot of times they can't do it or won't do it. They might be having a fight with another company, or they might be, might not meet the needs of the other company in terms of where co-location occurs because they're already covered and they don't need it here. But you see a lot of co-location, which is kind of good because you don't have a ton of towers out there. We have a couple places in the town that we have where they pay the town of Penfield to co-locate on our towers, one being at Harrisman Park on the water tower. We own the land. The Water Authority owns the water tower. It's a partnership. And then every time somebody comes in and tacks on another cell, we get compensated for that. So it's worked out well for us. But that's kind of that's something we have to look at because a lot of these were done. It's kind of fun watching how everything progressed over a 10-year period because the mindset is totally different now than it was back then. We were so worried about them, having to go out and seek them for these. We don't have to seek anybody out for telecommunications. They are on your doorstep every day. So.
And now they're in the process of upgrading their existing facilities,
Yeah.
so it's not like we're popping up towers left and right.
Right.
Well, even with fiber, I say, we met last week with Greenlight.
I was just gonna ask about them, yeah.
Greenlight's already in town. They're in the Silverwoods development. They're going down State Road. They're looking at the Villas of East Hampton. They're looking at Camden Park right now, is in their target at the moment. But obviously, as demand goes out, we'll look to service those areas, from there. But we met with them. It was just last week, and we'll session down in Henrietta. So.
And that's kind of number 3, engage the business community to identify gaps in services. Business community knows the gaps in services. They know what they're missing out on or what they don't have. And certainly if that becomes an issue to a lot of them, I'm sure that some providers are going to be able to provide them with what they need.
It's the vehicle that they use to communicate that to the town collectively, or is it just?
They haven't really run it to us. They'll go to their provider now, who their internet providers, and say, hey, I'm slow, you got to do something about this.
No, I'm saying we're engaging the business community to identify gaps.
Oh, I mean, I guess if if there was a big problem, I don't think there's a big problem here in terms of, because again, we don't have that many commercial districts, and they're all in good locations. I think the one that's really sore right now is the one down at Panorama, because you can walk into Home Depot and still can't make a phone call out of Home Depot. It's
If you're on
impossible.
AT&T.
Yeah, Verizon works there, but AT&T. Yeah.
Well, I can't do it, so.
So who do you
I
want?
know there's an issue.
Who's your service provider?
AT&T. It's here and there, but
It's not there.
the issue really is, I think that if they're having problems, their immediate response is, I gotta go back to my service provider and either find out why they're not doing what they need to for me, or I'm gonna get somebody else. And there's enough of them out there now. And now with Greenlight coming in, I think you're gonna see, once Greenlight finally takes off, and people start to understand its value, you're gonna start seeing a lot of places picking up on Greenlight.
So, I mean, that's obviously that technology, but then you've got the 5G and that's supposed to be able to go head-to-head with that,
Right.
speed-wise. So I guess we're going on a limb here a little bit. How much investment, I mean, do we need to look at from a town, how much, you got to back the right horse and take a look at those technologies.
Right.
And, I mean, yes, Greenlight does represent technology that does provide quicker service, but if you look at the ratings of 5G and those next generation,
Right.
the difference is not significant enough that.
You wouldn't take the 5G along with it if you could.
Yeah, we have that conversation
Well,
all the
again,
time. At what point do I cut the cable and just,
Well, I think that when the service providers say, hey, we got some competition here, we're gonna have to do something, because we wanna keep our group, they're gonna do what they have to make that happen. There's fiber optics all over Penfield. I mean, every time there's a development that occurs, fiber optics is installed to accommodate the area. So I can remember at one time, Rochester Tel and Frontier, when I was first starting working here, they were in every trench in every subdivision in town providing service to every house. And they don't even go after those units anymore. They know that the internet providers that are faster than them are going to do that and take care of it. It's not even a telephone issue anymore. Nobody even has a telephone.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is, again, when we are making recommendations to the next 10 years,
Mhm.
we need to look at those technologies.
Absolutely.
You know, I don't want to back the next Betamax, I'd rather back the VHS, you know,
I mean,
so.
And you have to be careful because we don't even know what's going to happen in 10 years.
Yeah, exactly.
We have to
Yeah,
make some
part of that
pretty-
isn't about, I wouldn't say backing the right thing, it's just being flexible and knowing that we have the ability that people can get the services that they need or desire.
Right.
I mean, fiber's coming, there's nothing about that we can't stop. They're gonna pull their permits, they're a utility provider, they're gonna go and do what they have to do to get to the communities or to the, what do they call it, the
Nodes or hubs or?
districts. Create the districts they wanna do.
And they're paying for the infrastructure, we're
Like I say,
not.
it's not coming at a cost of
Yeah,
loss.
I
They
mean,
come in.
we recognize what's out there, we'll facilitate the process as normal. We just wanna be flexible and open to what's next, the latest and greatest, obviously, because it benefits everyone.
Yeah, and maybe it should have been more specific, what we're talking about is building that flexibility, and so when that new technology comes in, we don't hamstring their ability
Right.
to be able to bring those services to the community.
That's a good point, because that was an issue when Greenlight actually is in Silverwood subdivision, because the developers of Silverwood understood the value of having it there. They had to run, after the project was built, they had to run lines in the ground next to our utilities, and we were kind of hesitant about that to make sure they didn't mess up something by accident. They wouldn't do it on purpose, but by accident. So we were a little hesitant about that, but we understand now that they're doing what they can do, just as any other utility would do that, to maintain their operations and still not impact our utilities as well. So you're right, we have to understand that they're going to be coming along, and they're going to have to bury lines in other places and come through people's backyards and that kind of thing, but you know, it's to the benefit of the community to allow that type of thing to happen, whether it's them or in 5 or 10 years, some group that's got
Some technology we hadn't even considered,
exactly,
yeah.
and I'm sure it'll be there. We haven't even thought about it yet, so I thought we were going to be saddled with cell towers for the rest of our lives, and that may not be the case at this point in time. You might see them even taken down at some point in time, but who knows?
It goes back to what Mark mentioned earlier with utilities, is, you know, how we meet annually with RG&E to understand what they have going on in the community, and they know what we're doing, what development's coming here. We proposed the same thing to Greenlight when we met with them last week, to say, hey, RG&E's already doing this with us. If you want to come in and meet with us, see what development is anticipated, what's coming in, maybe that can help your plans, where you're going next. I mean, my first thing to them was, are you planning on going down Route 250 anytime soon? Because there's just development that's coming that way. Or how far south have you come in? We learned that they've come down State Road, and they're just kind of up in that northern area right now. So, you know, we're trying to make ourselves available to these providers so that they understand where growth is occurring.
Well, it's a heck of a lot easier for them to install while construction's happening than going back in.
Absolutely, yep.
I mean, they've looked at micro trenching, they looked at other options, and they're finding a directional drilling spot for them, but obviously that's at a cost, and you're weaving around other utilities where, you know, same thing with, you know, RG&E and Time Warner, you know, they'll piggyback right off of, as soon as the water main's in and the sanitary and storm, you know, those utilities go in, the ground's not, you know, been
Well,
finalized
that's
yet,
the whole
and-
point. If they come and can have those conversations with you, and I mean, in this day and age, annually seems pretty stretched out. Should almost be happening more often. But they could piggyback on those projects and say, listen, you're trenching here anyways because you're putting a new sewer in or you're updating the sewer. Couldn't you maybe
You want to go in and
run those projects together and
That's our hope.
dig one trench one time? Yeah.
That's our hope.
So we do meet with them on a regular basis, and actually annually does fit, because they're planning out for the next year, or the year after, that type of thing. It's long-term planning. We know how long it takes for somebody to come in from beginning to end. It usually takes a year or so. So it works out pretty well. The same thing with the DOT. I think we're the only town that meets with the state DOT on a regular basis. That's been a godsend, because it does give us the idea. One thing was, we were very concerned about these cell towers in the right-of-way. We knew that wasn't going to happen on local roads, because the town board has jurisdiction over local roads. We were concerned a little bit about the county, but the county assured us they would not allow that to happen on their roads. We didn't know what the state DOT thought about it. It turns out they had a very strict policy about not allowing them on linear driving lanes. They put them in places like park and ride areas or, you know, rest stops, that kind of thing, so you're not going to see them, you know, along 441 or Empire Boulevard. So that was very helpful to find that out. And then, of course, they keep us up to date as to what kind of road improvements they're proposing for Penfield over the next year or two. So that's very helpful. So we do interact with a lot of agencies on a regular basis. We kind of have to. I mean, and they do with us because they want to know what's going on in the community as well. RG&E has been good because they have to determine what kind of gas capacity they have for a certain area. Do they need more? What they have is adequate or not. So it's good to have meetings with all these different agencies and making sure that everybody's on the same page. Right here. D. We kind of covered it. Again, you see these recommendations keep popping up. They're kind of redundant. I don't want to see that kind of happen in the next comp plan. It's either going to be a recommendation that you look at. It's almost like they kind of ran out of things to say as they got through the process, and I don't want that to be the case. I'm sure there'll be plenty for you to talk about without it have to be redundant.
We'll save paper.
Well, it just kind of, there's just no reason for it. I mean, we are going to follow the recommendations of the economic development plan where necessary, and take care of the 6 commercial area plans that are consistent with our, whatever plan you come up with for the next 10 years.
I guess, Jim, I do have one question, though. Do we have sort of a marketing plan for Penfield?
No, we started looking into that. That was part of the economic development plan. If you look at, for several years, you have to notice that there were banners up saying Lloyd's Corners out at 250 and 441, the Four Corners. It was a great idea, and I think it really perked up those areas. It became a nightmare in terms of maintaining the banners that were being ripped off the poles. Trucks were hitting them constantly. Wind was taking them off. We were finding banners out in the middle of the road, which then became a liability issue. It got to be crazy. That's kind of where we are right now. We're starting again with the Empire Boulevard and trying to get people to understand they're in Penfield up there and not in Webster. We're trying to brand that area as Penfield. We're looking at other options, and maybe that's a recommendation you come up with, looking at other viable options to brand these areas and to give them their own identity again. I'm not sure. I mean, I was really excited about it. I was the one that oversaw that. I didn't get a lot of people saying, "Oh yeah, I love the Four Corners banners," or "I love Lloyd's Corners," or Browncroft Corners, or LaSalle's Landing.
Not a big banners guy.
But they were kind of not the appropriate thing to use after we put them all up. So
I think they were also part of the bicentennial.
we did. We
I
had
think that's why the
bicentennial
emphasis
banners
was-
up. They lasted for a period of time. Ironically, the bicentennial banners kind of weathered the storm better than the other. These were gigantic banners, though, and I mean, you could lay it out, it would be this area right here. So I mean, you can imagine when the wind took those things, it was quite an adventure. So for some reason, the 441, 250 area was the worst. I mean, they had terrible winds going through there. They had truck traffic going through there. It was crazy. It just didn't work the way we wanted it to. But I think that if you make a recommendation, we'll look at other options that's viable.
I guess I was thinking more broadly, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because it reminded me we did have those banners. But I was thinking more broadly, more of kind of an outside sell. Is there any plan in the works, or has there been at some point, to reach out from Penfield to businesses or organizations that we would like to see in Penfield? Is there a plan, basically, to
Well,
market
we do that on a day-to-day
to the
basis. We talk
outside
to a
world?
lot of people coming in. People want to be in Penfield. I mean, it's a very desirable area because they know there's a lot of families here. I'm going to be talking to a group tomorrow, actually, about a place called Snapology. I don't know
What
if
is
you
it
know
called?
Snapology. I don't know if you know what that is. But it's elaborate Lego where you teach kids how to build robots and all that kind of stuff. They're interested in coming here because they know there's a ton of kids here, and the schools have a good robotics program as well. So they see that as a really great market, and as a result, we get a lot of that stuff in. And people don't understand how many people we turn away because they're just trying to do things that are totally contrary to the zoning district. They say, well, you approve everybody. We don't approve everybody. We might approve 2 out of 10 people. We tell people no a lot because what they're trying to do in certain districts just isn't permitted. It's not compatible with what's already there, and they don't mind taking buildings down here and there to accommodate what they want, but we just don't let them get to the point where they're coming into the board, because it's a waste of the board's time when we know they're not a permitted activity, and they need a use variance to do what they want to do, which is almost impossible to get. Because when you ask for a use variance, you're basically trying to prove that the property in question can't yield a return based on how it's currently zoned, and we all know that that's not the case for these commercial properties in Penfield. So we do turn a lot of people away, but the ones we get in are really good, and as I say, for being a secondary market, we do get some really great businesses in town. I think, I'm thinking about this Bach de Rock. I don't know if everybody knows what that is, but this group called Bach de Rock is over in the corner of 250 and 441.
The former eyesight building?
Yes, and that is one of the most popular places in town right now. As a matter of fact, they just won the PBC award for Business of the Year, I think one of the businesses of the year, so. It's family oriented, they got tons of kids over there. I mean, that's the kind of thing you try to draw people to, and that's where they want to be. So those are the things we're really looking for.
Yeah, it's across from Wegmans.
And we're crossing lines. All right, but that goes back to what you were saying, fostering a unique identity for each business district. We have tried to do it. I'm not so certain how appreciative the business owners were. I think they kind of depend on their ability to be able to market themselves. And that's true in many cases. I mean, I look at Mileage Master, for instance, on Brown Rock over by you and I. That's been there a long, long time, and they've had a lot of pressure to want to sell that property, to people to buy that property from them. They won't sell it because they do well, and I think they like being there. So, you know, it just depends on what your likes and dislikes are and what your condition is, and yeah, obviously it's a good situation. All right, on to community care.
Is it my turn already? Or do you want to do your next piece? It's up to you.
Am I next, or are you on?
Technically, I am, but it's up
Go
to you.
ahead. Go ahead if you want.
You're on such a roll.
Well, we'll break it up.
All right.
We'll save the best for last.
Start with the comp plan first.
Page 120.
Yep, down there. Awesome. Next section, community, character, and design. I was surprised at how much of this actually overlapped with what Jim just went through, so I'll be able to get through a little quicker. But I'll start by saying, the first line in this section says, community character can be described as the unique attributes of a community from the built and natural environment. It also includes the diversity of the population, the history, and the social and civic activities that take place in a community. So when we think about Penfield and the built environment that it is, it contrasts a lot actually when you think about it. We have West Penfield, where it's developed for a lot of single-family residential homes. We have business districts that Jim just went over that kind of surround it and border it. And then we have some natural settings within that west area, like the 1,000-acre swamp. We have the golf courses in the middle that create its border in a way right now, as does Route 250 and the zoning. Then we get out east. That's our other side. That's the contrast, where we have a very strong farming community and agricultural presence, and most of the open space Jim mentioned. And that's something that has continued in Penfield for years, and it's something that will continue for years. The first big change really is the rezoning of the mixed-use district, where it took place on Route 250, one of the most heavily traveled roads that we have. So we'll see transition there, but it's been designed in a way that buffers and offers transitional uses going back to the agricultural lands and the residential districts that surround it, so it's not designed to be an impact to people. Hopefully it provides a service and it provides amenities to them that they don't have now, that can be closer to them, more accessible, so on and so forth. The other part that goes into that part of character is the design element of that. And design element is the physical appearance of things. So when we talk about that, we're looking at what are the boards looking at when it's time for new development and redevelopment. Town board, planning board, they're both looking at a lot of architecture when new things come in. We have a design consultant on staff that we're, not on staff, on retainer that we use quite frequently when it comes to new designs, new buildings that are either large in their capacity or they are unique. So for example, we just went through, it was a 3-phase review process for the first mixed-use project that's coming in for Penfield Square. That's offering the continuum of care where you have the independent living, assisted living, memory care, commercial outbuildings, public green space, walkability, just about everything you can throw at it is there. And part of our challenge with that project was what's going to be the right architecture here. They were coming in with their designs. We have a lot of designs that are set forth in the mixed-use manual that are your design guidelines that you should try to strive for. So our consultant worked with the board and worked with the applicants to do a compare and contrast. This is what you're offering, this is what the manual is calling for. How do we get to a common ground to say, this is what we're all happy with, this is what's best for the project and the community? Over several meetings, several iterations of the plans, several reviews from our consultant, we got to a product that both offers a unique design, but something that isn't too far outside the box that people are going to look at and say, what the heck were we thinking? So I think it was overall a great success in terms of reviewing the designs and what that built product's going to be when that project breaks ground later this year. Let's see here. So the first part in the community character section, it says preserve open space and farmland. We talked about that. I'm going to skip it. It was really a recap of the open space plan. Next is preserve the historical and architectural value of sites and structures. This is ongoing within the town of Penfield. We have a historic preservation board that helps guide that process. A lot of those properties that come into play are either in the Four Corners district, they are located on 5 Mile Line Road, and they're also, and the first one was actually located at the Daisy Flour Mill off Blossom. That was one of the historic districts that was created. So can we go to one of my maps? I just want to show the historics. I got a series of things that I pulled out of all of our notes that we have. And let's, so where did my historic map go? Oh, in the document. Sorry, in the comp plan. Should be one of your PDFs that are open. Go to page 41. I just want to show you the map for our historic sites and overlay districts, just to give you an idea of where they are. First one I mentioned is in the Four Corners area. This was the most recently adopted one. Then we have a stretch of 5 Mile Line Road, and over here is the Daisy Flour Mill section. Then scattered throughout the town are a number of sites that are either locally designated landmarks and structures, and others that are also nationally listed as well. So they have a higher tier, a higher rank to their status.
There are about 7 or 8 of those, I think, in the town that have got national status. Most of them are
Yes.
local designated homes.
The yellow ones that are scattered out there.
That's a local one. Yeah, she's working.
So with that, when we are in these areas of town, anytime there's new development proposed there, if building facade modifications are proposed, if you're trying to update the building or build a new one, you're going to have to go through a multi-phase review process with our boards, whether it's the town board or the planning board. That other multi-phase part of it is working with the historic preservation board to go through every detail of that building, what it looks like, so that it complies with what their job is and what the architectural components are. And Jim works a lot with them. He oversees that historic preservation board, so if I'm missing something,
Well, I'm clerk to that board. There's the,
clerk, manage, facilitates.
Mrs. Belgiorno oversees that board.
Chairs it. You don't chair it.
No.
But they work on a lot of interesting projects. You look around town, if we can go to my slides. I wanted to show you a couple examples of that. This is not one of them. If we look at, there it did. Hang on. All right, so slow down.
Take care of Steve.
Well, Daisy Flour Mill, just to give everyone a point of reference, if you haven't seen it, haven't driven by it, this is what it looks like from its parking lot on Blossom Road. Again, our first historic preservation overlay district. Can you go to Merkley? Thanks. So this is a project that the town board just reviewed, and as well as the Historic Preservation Board. This is Dr. Merkley's dental practice that will be opening up on 5 Mile Line Road relatively quickly here. Those construction photos, Jim, you took those in the summer or the fall, I think?
Well, actually, those were just taken in the fall before
Yeah.
it got snowy. It got cold, so they were reluctant to put the exterior on during the cold weather, so they may start doing that when it's a little bit warmer.
But that was an example of something that's getting built in Penfield that went through a strict architecture review process, mainly so that we still had that same look and feel that people are used to in Penfield, that colonial nature, and a lot of those elements that kind of fit in with that area. And let's see, what else did I have in there?
Well, Dr. Smith's as well is a good idea, because these, and the four corners is really the purview of the town board. The town board approved this project, they approved Dr. Merkley's, and you can see they're scaling things to accommodate what's out there. They're not putting things in that are overly sized.
Well, it's a commercial business that has a residential character to it that kind of meshes the two together.
Yep. Other structures, other projects that have been built. Jim mentioned one earlier. It was Wickham Farms. I believe it was the first one. If you haven't seen it, this is what their CSA building is going to look like. They also have another structure out there for events further back on the property. This is going to be the base of their operations now.
We showed them cider mill.
It's coming up.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So this is Oak and Apple Cider Mill across the street from Wickham Farms. This is on Streets Corners Road. Actually, their access is on Dublin Road. This was all reviewed by the planning board. It was reviewed as well with their architectural consultant as well. They had a goal here. They wanted to build a barn on the hill and kind of make it fit in with the countryside, and I think that's what they achieved. Came out really well in our opinion. They got an outdoor patio space. They have the tasting room inside, and as far as I know, they had a great success this fall from their harvest and sold every bottle they had.
Closed early because they sold
Closed
so
early.
fast.
Closed early. So we're happy to see that one come through. We have Shoots just did an addition onto theirs. That's the first one there. If you have, I'm sure everyone's been there by now since we've had to get our fix of fried cakes and cider. But this was their recent addition, and it's another example of someone trying to maintain the look and feel of their property and keep it how Penfield's used to seeing it. They did a nice job matching all the materials together. Another example is the Ugea Dental on Penfield Road. This, like Mark said, it's a business that's been scaled down to look like a residential feel to it. So it has a nice pedestrian view, pedestrian scaled elements, and fits in well with the area. What do I have next? Oh, this is...
Coming soon.
This one's on its way. It's wrapping up its site plan review process. This is the veterinary animal hospital that'll be taking place, that'll be being built on Empire Boulevard. And you can kind of see, it's tough to see there with all the blues. Some is the sky, some is the building. Again, residential feel to it.
This is, many of you might remember driving down, and certainly you will, you're in my neighborhood. Driving down Empire Boulevard, starting to go down the hill, you saw a big clump of trees out in front of the house. It was a lime greenhouse that hadn't been taken care of like in 30 years.
See the house.
And the owner passed away, and Dr. Bain was able to pick up the property, and he wants to relocate his animal hospital from Laurelton, Empire Boulevard, Laurelton area, and bring it up here. A lot of it'll all go away. You'll see it from the street. All that brush and everything will go away. But he's got a big piece of property there, but he's only using a very small portion of it.
And before I go on to the next topic, I want to show you something that didn't fly in Penfield, just to give you an example of what some commercial businesses are trying to propose and just did not fly with our board. Could you go to Qdoba in Greece on Google?
Do we probably have stuff, do we still have the plans?
Don't bother digging, they're in 12 different folders.
Do you know, where is it in Greece? Is it in Ridge Road?
Ridge Road, to the right, not that much.
Yeah, it's right by the Marriott. Go back. Nope, the other way. It's right next to Ashley Furniture Plaza. It's right in that plaza.
There it is. So that
Qdoba's.
building, see it? Up.
Oh, yes, I do. I don't know if that's there.
Well, that's not even the full scale.
I don't know if we can
It's
see
not
it
a
from
street
there.
view.
I'll just load up, it was 2015.
So this Qdoba building, it came in to our board with about 60 different materials, in my opinion, of what they wanted to show on the outside of the building. And originally they came into the board with, I would say what's similar to, thank you, what's similar to kind of what Tim Hortons was doing at the time. Just that red, earth tones, simple building. After they got approved, they went through what I thought was a complete upside down move at corporate and said, we're going to redesign our building before we build it. And it came in with,
We want to be different. We want to stand out. We don't want to be Chipotle.
yeah, it was, we don't want to be that.
Lowe's. We want to be ourselves.
And well, they tried to do that. They had about, they had materials on that building that were not going to fly here. They had different tile colors that just did not fit in with the area. They had murals of what I thought was Nacho Libre on the outside of the building, and I think one was like a, wasn't there one like a mountain lion or something? There, all kinds of
They
weird
were all
murals.
characters from a Mexican board game, but it's...
There you go.
On the side of the building, it was an interesting aesthetic. It was going to look a lot like...
Does this one exist?
This is the one. This isn't finished yet. This is the one they were building in Henrietta.
And
In addition, it had metal slats that goes up about this high, and the bright green or
Metal
yellow
grating
lettering.
over the windows.
it was different. So our board, we went through what felt like an eternity, but probably, I don't know, 2-3 months.
This is
So
what,
they started
this is
with
what we approved.
originally. And you can see how it has the earth materials, simple colors, and from there. And then, well,
That's the original one.
hang on, you got architecture right there.
13.
Go to that maybe. Oh no.
It's too many letters.
There's 10, 31, 13.
Modification.
15.
That might be it. There. So they went from A to B. And our board said, one, where did this come from? Two, it's not really in keeping with Penfield. That was their first and foremost comment. And if you're familiar with the site up at Bay Creek Empire, that's what we ended up with as our result, is that product that's out there today, where it got rid of a lot of these materials and kind of a compromise between the first originally one and what they proposed there. What was that?
That was the old gas station.
Oh, that's got
Oh.
the mask there.
Oh yeah, there's Nacho Libre right there. He was gonna welcome you as you came in the front door. So that was an interesting review process when it came to, trying to understand and working with the developer to say, well, what do you want to see here? We said, well, definitely don't want to see that. Tone it down. Try to bring back elements of the first one into this and make your color schemes work. And that's what we ended up getting is what's out there today.
Well, and I think the boards are always looking for what's more of a, say, a timeless look. I mean, you can make it your own, but what's going to carry forward? I mean, Qdoba, as we know, businesses come and go, and I hope Qdoba is very successful, but don't know if they're there forever. But if you modify something so far, one way or the other, that you don't really have a timeless building, and then either you're looking at a total knockdown or something else from that.
All right. So that moves us on to item C, actually, in the charts of many things. It says the goal was develop attractive, inviting, and pedestrian-oriented activity centers, streets, and other spaces for the community. In a nutshell, our mixed-use development district will achieve that in every single way. So I don't want to hash around that too much because we have talked about it at length. We have some great projects coming in for it. Lots of trails through there, lots of green space, lots of pedestrian-oriented buildings with, you know, businesses on the first floor, residential above. Nothing that's too kind of overpowering or nothing intimidating to someone who's kind of walking up to these buildings and trying to explore and visit these places for the first time. Something that's more inviting. The biggest thing that comes out of that is walkability. And will forever be one of our biggest goals in Penfield, to connect people to places in their homes without having to drive everywhere you go. There are things you can't avoid. You're going to have to drive to some things, we get that. But if we can make it easier to get there, and you got a nice day to walk, go for a bike ride, whatever it is, that's our goal. And new types of development, redeveloping plazas, if there's an opportunity to gain some of that space back, we're going to do it. Something like Baytown Plaza, for example. We cut tops in half to create a street of shops that's much more walkable, has a public green that could be a future farmer's market. Examples like that are going to continue to show their faces all over town. And we expect Panorama Plaza's gone through some changes. They might be trying to lift up some of their parking one day because they don't need all the parking they have. That's just that's the current times. We don't need a sea of asphalt out there to really achieve the goal of what those plazas are anymore. So we'll see a lot of development there, and wherever we can turn back to green space or we can make useful space again, we're going to work with them to do that. So if we go through these goals quickly, again, I already talked about the design consultant. We have one on retainer. We continue to use them very often for all of our projects. The street design requirements with street types and buffers. We do have complete streets coming with mixed use. Those are the ones that have street parking, street line tree line streets. Those words, too many hyphens in them sometimes. Tree line streets. Wider sidewalks that promote walking, you know, with either a bicycle and a car at the same time. I'm sorry, not a car, a person, a pedestrian and a bike, someone walking their dogs, strollers, whatever it is. Just get a wider footprint out there so people don't feel like they got to play chicken with someone walking down a 5-foot sidewalk. So we're going to see a lot of that come into play. We have the third item. Implement existing design guidelines for the Four Corners area. As Jim said, the Four Corners has their own design process right now. The town board oversees that for all new applications that come in. And develop design guidelines or pattern books for infill and redevelopment of various areas in the town. If we look at infill development, we talked about that at one of our previous meetings. That's for residential development. We have vacant parcels that are kind of tucked away that people have held onto for a long period of time. One house is on it or nothing's on it. And really our tool that we have for that is cluster development. And again, we've talked about that at other meetings, so I won't go into that too much. We have that and we like to use it wherever we can to help preserve that space.
Before you leave this though,
I won't.
we've been talking to the consultant that worked with us on the last comprehensive plan update. Rather than pay him oodles of money to do this over the next year or so, we are going to bring him in for an evening to talk to you a little bit about trends in housing, trends in what's happening nationally, to get a better feel for what we think is going to happen, not just to Penfield, but to the entire area in terms of what people's needs are and what they're looking to develop at this point in time. So, and what the demographics are and what's occurring there too. So it should be an interesting evening. He's a very good speaker. He's got a lot of background. He does a lot of work. He actually was on, I think, the Perriton Planning Board or the Fairport Planning Board for a period of time. But he is a planning consultant. We like him a lot, we're gonna bring him in to talk to you sometime here for a lot longer.
Good segue. I talked about how plazas are redeveloping, so we'll manage that as time goes on. And overall, I think our code has kind of taken a leap forward in this, where we are emphasizing reducing the parking needs for places, increasing pedestrian connectivity, and providing more green space. So all of our design guidelines for all types of development are at that level now, and developers are working with us on that. The last part says, define and promote Penfield's identity to residents and visitors. And Jim kind of stole my thunder on that one because of Penfield with Baytown Plaza. It's a perfect example of not understanding where you are. What is your town? Everyone who goes there thinks they're in Webster. Everyone who lives up north in Penfield thinks they actually live in Webster. They don't understand that just because you have a zip code and a mailing address means you're in that township. And they still pay, and they pay Webster school taxes. So there's a lot of forgotten identity there. And that's been our biggest struggle, if you think of marketing for Penfield, is understanding that you're not actually, that you're in the town of Penfield still. Some people don't get that.
The other part of it, though, too, is the comment you brought up earlier. If you were to ask residents of Penfield, what is Penfield to you? I mean, you'd like to hear what they have to say because it might be 100 different things, but it would be interesting to see if there was some connected thought process as to what they feel the town really is. Is it just a family-oriented community that provides a lot of great recreation, or has good schools, or whatever the case may be? It's not a busy town in the sense that you have a ton of commercial activity, but you have enough or close to enough what you need here without having to go too far away to get other things in the way. It would be interesting to find out what the thought is as to what people think Penfield is to them. You know?
Well, I think one of the drawbacks, and I think it's something we're going to address, I'm sure, as a committee, and that has come up time and again, is that we don't have a true kind of town center. It's not like the village of Fairport or anything like that. So that, I think, is a stumbling block.
Yeah.
Just segueing into
Yeah,
what
segues.
you want to
Good
say.
segues. Good segues tonight.
Thank you.
It's an excellent point. Before we get there, though, if you look at this map, I just pulled up the zip codes quick. I mean, Penfield alone has 6 different zip codes in it. Not a lot of towns have that. Webster certainly doesn't. They have 1. Not a big problem for them. There are 4 different school districts in Penfield. People forget. And again, most of northern Penfield has a Webster zip, and their students go to Webster schools. And Jim brought up a perfect example of Baytown Plaza and losing that sense of identity there. And then, as you said, Donna, what is the center of Penfield? In this plan, there were surveys done. I guess we talked to some folks. I wasn't here at the town at this time, but there was focus groups brought in to say, again, how do you identify with Penfield? Or do you think there's a center of town? And a lot of people didn't really know how to define a center of town in Penfield. Four Corners is the closest thing we have to that. If you look at a map, the geographic center of town is right here. Right here. And that park is a huge draw. It's a great thing to have. It gives people a lot of community pride, I think, because of all the things that take place back there during the summer. You can, any night of the week, you can find something to do. I think that's also one of our challenges too with mixed use, is that in a way we're kind of creating another center of town. The Four Corners will always be a draw because there's so much activity down there, but if mixed use takes off at the rate we expect it, we could have another center of Penfield too, near the center of Penfield. And that's a huge draw for people, and it's not easy. You talk to any planner, they'll tell you that creating a new center of town is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. But again, we have 2 projects in right now that could be really good pieces to help start that. What else do I have? There's the 2 points in there. It says initiate a community identity campaign. Tough to do. Tough to do. I don't think we tried doing that. Jim just talked about it. At that time, it was difficult. I think now that we have such a strong tool of social media, that kind of changes the way you treat and how you define community character and how you have your presence online for your residents. A lot of people have gone that way. Not everyone, but a lot of people go there for immediate information. And the second one, develop and implement a plan that identifies key gateways and treatments, drawing from recommendations of existing area plans. Examples of that are drawing from the open space plan to implement things, and as well as the adoption of the mixed-use zoning district and the development manual. That's all I got. Any questions about community character or some of the design elements or what we go through? Awesome. Your turn.
Last section. Hang in there.
Section. All right, government leadership. Try to get through it for you. These are 10 years ago, again, remember, encourage and improve the ability of stakeholders to communicate with and participate in government. And 10 years ago, even our website wasn't, it was running probably, but not very
Social media was in its infancy.
It wasn't what it is now. So now we continue to utilize the PCTV, the town's website, e-news, other forms of media to communicate with town residents. Our PCTV and website group, Dave Renner and his gang down there are constantly on this, updating, providing information to the public. A good example was what they did during the process of purchasing Shadow Pines, keeping the public abreast as to where we were with it. Those kinds of things are happening. The supervisor's column every week comes out, gives the public information that it needs as to what's going on in the community. We've been doing a lot of work, particularly Mark and I lately, with homeowners groups. We're working right now very closely with the Ellens Creek Valley Homeowners Association. They have the project next to them that I referred to earlier, which was the 5 buildings or 6 buildings that might be going in over behind Thermo Fisher. That obviously is a potential impact to them, and we want to make sure that they're as comfortable as possible as this process goes through. We've actually even incorporated them into the planning process with the developers. They've met with the developers once, and I assume we'll do it again before too much longer. So we have to try to keep everybody involved in the process, whatever the issue may be in somebody's neighborhood. Continue to promote an open and transparent government. I think the town board has done that. They do their work in front of a television camera for the public review every Wednesday night, whether it be at a work session or whether it be a legislative session. All the work is done out so everybody can see. People can come and listen. Ed Lindstone, who was here a second ago, I don't know where Harry is back.
He's hiding.
He's here at every single one of them, so he can attest to that.
Jim, did they solve, I know there was a problem a few years ago based on a piece of equipment that although you could watch live, things were not, you couldn't
Yes,
record it from.
Dave would be
Did
much
that
more
get
inclined to give you the
fixed?
information, but it
Yes.
was a very expensive
Did-
piece of equipment. And it took a while for us to be able to get that back online again, but we did.
Okay.
And
Good.
I think that's been resolved. But we're in the process of working with people as best we can to make sure that everybody understands what's happening. We had our website a couple of years ago, was voted the most transparent website in the county, which was a great honor, I thought. They do an awful lot of work. There's a lot of information on the website. And they do what they can to make sure the public's aware of what's happening as it's taking place. So it's been a great tool for us. Who knows what's going to happen in the next 10 years. We'll probably be able to do things telepathically by the time we meet 10 years from now. So, but during that period of time, we'll continue to do what we can to make sure the public is aware of what's happening on a day-to-day basis.
What I can say here is that our our communications team just underwent a very lengthy and elaborate RFP process through the end of 2018, and we are going to be moving forward with an update to the website. So that is going to be happening over the next 5, 6, 7 months, but the amount of effort and due diligence that our communications team put into, you know, compatibility with what's current as far as social media and what's current with the best practices, and then what is anticipated technology down the road that they're aware of, integrating obviously PCTV, live technology, integrating social media, integrating other kinds of interfaces, far exceeded what my expectations were when they issued the RFP. So our website is going to have a major facelift, and the other thing is it's going to be able to consolidate. I think we have right now 4 concurrently running web pages under the town umbrella: PCTV, Recreation, the town page, and maybe Rec Track.
Yes.
Through, that's how you can sign up for all of the different programs. So there's 4 different right now, but none of them are really, they speak to each other, but they're not really working in concert. So this whole new platform is going to be able to streamline and provide better efficiencies for everything that the town provides. And then, you know, I only can suspect that as this takes off and as it's worked on, you know, Donna, to your point, I mean, there may be ways for more community outreach or community input through this, or seeking or securing community input. So, you know, there's a lot of information still to come on this, but the company that was selected has worked with, you know, over 1,500 government and municipal entities across the United States. They've been around for 20 years, so they have a significant track record of success, and so we're very excited about moving in that direction. So I just wanted to jump in there that we are already now starting to kind of go to Penfield's website 2.0, I guess, as we move into the next decade.
Any questions on that? Thanks for bringing that up, because I wasn't quite as up to date on that as you were. So, talking about instituting, I'm at number 3 now, instituting a program of regular community surveys on selected relevant topics to increase frequency of the citizen contact using the town's website and other municipals' websites. If it falls into place, just what Rob said, it probably would make it easier for us to do survey work if we need to or want to with the public. I know you heard Chris Bilo in a couple weeks ago talking about what he's done with his surveys. Certainly this might be able to enhance those surveys better than what we've been able to do in the past. So it's going to be a real benefit to the community to have that in place. Expand the neighborhood notification policy to include electronic communication. We have done that. Years ago, we notified everybody within 500 feet. We now have the ability, if we need to go out and notify all the associations that are in town, regardless of what's happening, just to let them know what is happening. And then also, if there are certain areas that are going to be directly affected that are outside of our range for notification, it gives us the ability to do that now with emails, that type of thing. So we try to keep everybody informed who might be adversely or potentially adversely impacted by some kind of an action.
Plus we have our mapping software and the
Yes.
other tools in the office that help us identify people within a certain radius of a project so that everyone that can be notified is notified.
Coordination of government participation programs with other local school districts. We obviously are a partner to the school district in many ways. Certainly we have mutual programs. They allow us to use their facilities. As Chris had noted in his presentation to you. There are other things that happen though too that you may not be aware of. For instance, every year Tony LaFawn brings in the second graders from the schools. I think Cobbles usually brings them in from other places, but Cobbles started out that way. So for a day we know that it's going to be a second grade jamboree here, which is it's wild, but it does give them the idea of how government works, and they spend a lot of time in this room identifying how the town board does what it does. I know Mark comes in and talks a little bit about engineering activities, and you guys are in for planning activities, that type of thing. So you do kind of spend a day with the kids and get them to understand what's happening in their local government. We certainly work with the Cub Scouts on tons of projects throughout the year. A lot of kids trying to get their Eagle badges, and thanks to the Trails Committee, they've been a big help working with us So you get those kids that are Eagle badges. We also have our participation in government situation where kids are always coming in, trying to do some type of event with the town board, and they have to come to their meetings. And we've had kids that actually shadowed us for days to get their work done. So it's been a great partnership with the school districts to let these kids know what their responsibilities and rights are as citizens in the town of Penfield. Here. Foster governmental procedures and programs that are business friendly. I think we've done that. We talked a little bit about that earlier. Again, you're seeing a little bit of repetition in these recommendations. We've been trying to minimize those as best we can with your group. Maintain an inventory of sites available for economic development. We do have an inventory of all the properties in Penfield, of all the businesses in Penfield. We know when they're leaving, when they're coming in. So if there are properties that are vacant and somebody shows us that they want to do something, we've got a list of places they can go to look at, see if they like them or if they want to do something differently. But we try to keep those vacancies down to a minimum. And as I said earlier, a lot of the time the reason they're vacant has nothing to do with the business, it has nothing to do with the town. There are outside situations occurring such as contamination that cause them to be a problem. Maintain an inventory, continue to collaborate with local business organizations and other neighborhood community groups. As I said, we work with the PBC. Back 10 years ago, there were 2 groups that they had to work with. Sometimes it didn't work out well, sometimes it did. We've had a great relationship with the PBC, and we talked about the Elms Creek Homeowners Association, as there are others as well. Continue to evaluate and, if necessary, modify and streamline the approval process. I think the town board, once created the approval process, has kind of streamlined it as best they can at this point in time. I've had nothing but compliments from people that have been involved in the process and had their businesses started through that process.
And you talked about the expedited one that they use in the 4 corners.
Yes, that's right. So that's worked out well, and certainly we're always looking at ways to make it better, but right now it's running pretty well the way it is. Maintain a high quality of service delivery. I think we try to do that. And, if you talk to people throughout the county, I think Penfield's recognized as being one of the top towns in the county for getting things done. No matter what agency you deal with, we do a lot of work with all of them. And we're on a lot of county committees, that type of thing. So
We also have a lot of developers or engineering firms that do work here that often thank us after their review process, even though it does take a matter of months, sometimes a year, sometimes a couple. They're still very happy with us at the end of it because there are external factors that may delay a project, but we do what we can to help facilitate every project.
yeah, absolutely. One of the groups I'm really proud of is the Historic Preservation Board. Those boards get a bad rap in various communities throughout the country because everybody thinks that they're just trying to get the best they can from everybody. This board works with everybody. They work with them in terms of making it cost effective for whatever improvements they want to make on the property. And they've gotten a lot of kudos from a lot of people in the districts about what they've done to help them get to where they have to be. So that's a real plus. Strengthening relationships with surrounding municipalities and government agencies in an effort to pursue common goals. We certainly do that. We partner up with Perrington and Webster. Obviously, we're kind of dependent on them because of the sanitary sewer capacity issues we talked about earlier. We have common drainage issues that we have to deal with on a regular basis, common traffic issues that we have to deal with. So we have very close relationships with Perrington, Webster, Pittsford and Brighton even, and even Arundecoit. So we have that commonality with the Arundecoit Bay, with Webster and Arundecoit. The 3 towns, along with the county of Monroe and the DEC, are on a committee to oversee and review development that occurs on Arundecoit Bay to ensure it's not going to adversely impact the other 2 towns. And we've been meeting since 1984 on a monthly basis. I've been meeting on Thursday with them, so I've been here since 1984 working on that committee. So it's a very strong committee. There's good support from all 3 towns and the DEC. And there's a lot of interaction among all of these different agencies on a regular basis. Let's see. Talked about continuing to coordinate development infrastructure with adjacent communities. We just talked about that. Partnering with other municipalities that are agencies to consolidate and or share services as a means to cut costs. I know that particularly the DPW departments share different types of equipment if they need to without having to go out and buy new equipment. If one of the communities in close proximity to us gets into a situation where they need help, we provide that and vice versa. As you remember, the town of Arundecoy had a fire over their DPW department a couple of years ago. The town board authorized the town to allow them to borrow some of our equipment during that period of time to get them through it. They would do that for us as well. It's just a common courtesy among the communities to do that. We do share various pieces of equipment for quick jobs versus having to go out and lease equipment or buy it for no good reason at all. So there is a lot of support among the different communities, and actually the school district does the same thing. I mean, over the years we've used their equipment, they've used ours to accommodate different projects. So there's a lot of interaction among all those communities. Work closely with this goes back 10 years, it's kind of interesting. Work closely with the Monroe County Water Authority to plan and maintain the public water supply system. 10 years ago, the entire town of Penfield did not have a water supply. A lot of the town still was on wells. The town does now have water supply. There's only one area that does not have public water, and that is the area up on Avalon Trail. And the problem is that you have to go back several thousand feet down sweeping hills and valleys, and you're basically serving 6 people or 8 people down there. And it's just not cost effective to run that kind of a line down to them to serve them with water. They haven't had any problems with their water quality, but it would just cost so much that they'd have to pay an exorbitant amount in taxes to offset the cost. What we did several years ago, service all of East Penfield, and then the last area we serviced, which was kind of costly, a little bit more costly than what the rest of us pay on our tax bill, is the area down at Thomas Cove Road over there by the Daisy Flour Mill. There's about 7 properties down there. And it cost quite a bit to put the water in, but they wanted it and they were willing to pay for it, so we did it. So other than that area, the entire town now has water, which it did not have when this was done 10 years ago. So again, a little bit of, you know, updates on things that didn't occur 10 years ago. D, utilize elected officials, advisory board members, and staff as ambassadors and educators within the community. I don't think anybody would disagree that I think that's what our job is. That's what we're here to do. Whether it's staff members, whether you're in the building department, it's not just to issue a permit, it's to educate people how to do things properly and safely. It's our responsibility to tell potential buyers of property what their rights and responsibilities are so they don't get caught up in something that they can't deal with after they've bought it. We always encourage everybody to buy things contingent upon getting your approval, because if you can't get the approval, now you're stuck with a piece of property you can't use. We're constantly in training. I know everybody trains. Mark has to go for training to keep his certifications. Planning department does its training. The zoning does its training. All of our building inspectors are responsible for going to building classes. I'm sure you've had to do the same thing over the years, Roland. The planning boards have to go to site plan review training, seeker training, seeker being the State Environmental Quality Review Act, which is responsible for all actions in the community, no matter what they are.
Part of this process.
Yeah, and so everybody's responsible for acting as an ambassador to the community. And you know, everybody knows the town board because they vote for the town board, but it's our responsibility to make sure the town board doesn't get a black eye because we did something stupid and put them in an awkward position. That's not their fault that things like that happen. It's the staff has to be accommodating to its constituency. I mean, we work for you. It's our responsibility to help you through processes if you need them. Most people come into the town hall don't know what they have to do to get a building permit or what they have to do to open up a business.
Or to build a house.
Or even to build a shed or a pool or a deck. And it's our responsibility to help you get through that process and make you understand what has to be done and try to make it as palatable for you to do it as possible and not just an absolute nightmare for you. So that's what we do. That's our job. That's why we're here.
A quick question, Jim. The planning and zoning board, didn't it used to be 7 people and now it's 5?
Yes.
Why is that?
I don't know. To be perfectly honest, I just
State
don't.
law allows either a 5 or 6 member board.
Well, I know that it's
I think
allowed.
we
I'm
were
just
having.
wondering, like, if we're saying we want to reach out and educate or whatever.
You're supposed to have an odd number board.
You're
You're supposed to have an odd number board, and I think
Right.
we were having problems with attendance.
I think planning board, we were at 6 for a while, and that
And it
makes
just,
an awkward 3-3 vote.
yeah,
if
you're
you
getting
have
a lot of tie votes, and that's not really what you're supposed to be doing. It's not fair to the applicant, and it's not fair to the town. So I think that when that
Attendance
sixth
was an
person
issue.
decided to step down for whatever reason, they said, you know, we got 5, we can do it with 5. And actually, I think
Zoning board's been 5 as long as I...
the zoning board's always been 5. And actually, I gotta say, with all the boards, I can't remember us having a problem reaching quorums. The board members are very, very good about coming to meetings, not missing a lot of meetings. Everybody gets sick and everybody goes on a vacation once in a while, but generally speaking, all those board members are very good about meeting their requirements and responsibilities as being on the board. So far, we haven't really had an issue with that. Yes.
Are all of your development applications subject to a board approval? Namely, you talked about streamlining process. Here's an example. I have a house on a 10-acre parcel, and I just want to subdivide 5 acres off of it. Would I have to come into planning board?
Yes.
You're creating it.
If you're subdividing property, yes, you do. If you were to build a house on that 10 acres, you could come into our planning office and market review it.
But there's another way around that. Under New York State law, where if you're creating less than 3 lots, you could do it administratively. Or you could do an in-house review and not be subject, with, of course, the blessing of the planning board, do it administratively, in-house review, and not be subject to a planning board action necessarily.
You're right, you could, but I think it comes down to the transparency issue again. It's a situation where you want the neighbors around that property to know it is being
And
split.
it's a balance between that and streamlining,
That's right, that's
what
right.
you're saying,
And
right?
and actually, for that kind of a
That's another
situation, it's not a
means,
long...
And that's another means.
Yeah, it's not a long process, though, for a single-family development, unless there's some outstanding issue. We did actually have one, and we do periodically have a situation where somebody tries to split property and it doesn't meet set side requirements, or it doesn't meet area requirements. Then you got to send them to the zoning board, and you're already in the process anyway. So generally speaking, when you're subdividing
But
property,
they can be flagged a lot of times in that initial interface with the applicant. How much area exists for the zoning, how
But yeah,
lot width,
no,
try-
we do in
we-
every
all
case,
that
yeah.
can be addressed.
We'll always meet with someone
Yeah.
before they dump money into a plan. You know, whether it's with a surveyor or an engineer or whoever it is. We tell them, come meet with us first, tell us exactly what you're planning here, so that we know which course we need to take you on. And as Jim said, transparency, our code is just, we've always required
Oh,
that.
yeah. And it's...
Even one lot going to 2,
Right.
even if everything complies with zoning, that we're still gonna bring you to the planning board to acknowledge the fact that this lot's getting separated, for whatever purpose. Oftentimes they'll come in with a site plan too, for a home on that property. So while we're at it, we do a site plan review with them, and subdivision approval all at once to just try to streamline it all at the same time.
The biggest problem...
On a one-house wonder, so to speak.
Yes.
And, or even a commercial building that's putting on a simple addition.
We do have the ability to do it under a certain square footage. After that, it becomes kind of big, and you gotta come in and let people know what you're doing. The biggest problem we really have residentially is when you have these pre-existing non-conforming lots that don't meet the 1 acre or the 2 acre requirement, and they might not even make the half-acre requirement because they were done 85 years ago, but they still have the right to develop their lot as a pre-existing non-conforming, but then you gotta go through the process of making sure they have septic that works properly on the site. They always need to
If you have a
generate
septic on an existing lot and you go to subdivide, that the leach field isn't crossing
That's
over the
right,
new line.
that's right.
Well,
So
even the
show that as
expansion
well.
area.
But it's a matter of, like you say, in streamlining things. There's some simple cases where maybe something like that could be looked at.
Well, I mean, if you're
as
comfortable
another
with that,
alternative.
that could be a recommendation.
Yeah, even like a simple building addition
Yeah.
on a commercial property, let's say, without prolonging the process.
Yeah.
As a for instance, and then when you get into pre-existing properties, you know, you could write that into a statute and code.
You could search certain
saying that
criteria,
if
certain
this
things.
these properties existed prior to 2005, they were since rezoned, they would be subject to that zoning prior to 2005, when they were initially developed. That's
Yeah, I think what we want to do at some point in time with you
you
is,
can revamp into your code and allow that into your code
Yeah.
a little bit more leeway.
I think what we want to do with you is take you on a site tour of the town. We're going to do it someday when it's not dark at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or maybe if you're willing to, we could take an early Saturday morning and do it then, and just spend some time with you, go around town and look at some of the issues that we deal with, and
Try to let the
with
snow
it,
melt.
yeah, and give you a good feel. We'll get some donuts or cupcakes or whatever, so, I mean, we will feed you, but I think I'd like to do that with you, especially as we start getting into some of these areas. We're looking for your input as to what you think we should be doing with these areas over the next 10 or 20 years, and get a feel for that. We'll set that up for you when it gets warmer a little bit and it's not as uncomfortable. We'll have a van or something that we can get everybody in, and take you out and just show you some of the things we're thinking about. All right. Kind of keep that in the back of your mind, and we'll use that as a process. Yeah, I'm almost there. They had a recommendation to initiate a volunteer recognition program to show gratitude and provide opportunities for interaction among boards and committee members. I don't think we ever really initiated a recognition program. I do know that the town board, number one, really does recognize the staff on a regular basis. We have various types of breakfast or lunch or whatever the case may be. Rob can attest to the fact that they're always bringing some agency or some group in that's been doing work in the community for one reason or another, and recognize them, whether it's the Boy Scouts or whether it's the Shepherd Home or somebody's always coming in. And I know the town board takes time to allow the public to know what they do and the value they have to the community, and then, every so often a proclamation comes out or a plaque or something. So I know that there's no specific plan per se, but it just happens on a natural basis just because of people doing what they do in this community. So that's kind of where we are right now, and we can kind of talk about that as an option. Just to kind of finish up for you. Ensure that the town continues to participate in local, regional, and state organizations. That happens on a day-to-day basis. One of the resolutions the town board passes every year has got about 50 or 60 different organizations that we all belong to for one reason or another. And we've been doing that for years and years. Those organizations interact with us on a regular basis to provide us with educational information, with planning information, whatever the case may be, engineering. And we work with them on a regular basis. Require staff, advisory board members, officials to keep updated on current planning and design trends. We're obligated to do that by law. We have to do that. And we send
job description, I'd imagine. Right?
Yeah, we send our staff to various seminars and programs throughout the state and locally. The Monroe County Planning Department actually has a very good planning program, which anybody can go to if they want to. There's a fee to it, but it does give you a good feel for what's happening planning-wise and what you're responsible to do as a planning board member or a zoning board member. Encourage citizens to become involved in the community. I checked today, and there are currently 30 residents with paid positions on the boards, the planning board, zoning board, conservation board, historic preservation board. And we currently have 51 volunteer residents on our various committees, such as drainage, transportation. We probably are on half of those as well. So we do get a good turnout for people willing to volunteer for the community. And that's not to even mention people like the food cupboard and all these other places that people are doing great things with. But we do have a lot of volunteers that we deal with on a day-to-day basis here. They talked about developing a youth advocacy council, and maybe, Rob, maybe you can talk to this a little bit. I know that at one time Kathy Cummings acted as a youth advisor.
The enthusiasm has come and gone over the years.
Yeah.
It is something that Chris and I have discussed recently about sort of just, furthering the partnership between the Penfield Recreation and the school district, so there should be more coming on that. But I know that when at least 10 years ago, I think Kathy spearheaded sort of more of a closely knit organization, and I think that kind of fell off, and maybe some change in staff over the years, but it is something that we're working on re-engaging.
Sounds good. Then finally, pursuing outside funding opportunities to reduce the cost of government activity or government services. That's an ongoing thing with all of us. I mean, every town's looking to do that all the time. There are certain things that we get funded for, but we are constantly looking at grants. Mark's constantly writing a grant request, whether it be for sidewalk installation, whatever the case may be, but it's an ongoing thing. We have in the past actually hired grant writers to come in and do certain projects for us, and they were so intricate that we didn't have the time or the energy to do it. But we do write grants on a regular basis for various projects throughout the community. I'm sure Chris Byler does the same thing with his group. And certainly the DPW does it for all the work that they're doing on a regular basis. Continue to prepare and update plans and studies that illustrate a clear community-based vision. I think the fact that you're all here tonight indicates that we do that. We are constantly updating our plans and programs. And we talked a little bit about tonight about a couple of the plans that we have that are outdated that need to be looked at, the open space plan being one of them. So that's something that I'm sure you'd want to look at as a recommendation to keep that intact and make sure that that takes place on a sustained basis. Maintain membership to appropriate listservs, email lists, websites to receive notifications and eligibility for requirements of state and federal grants. State and federal governments have been great about getting that out to us. They get it out to every town. If there's something coming up and they think that we're interested in it, whether it's for drainage purposes or traffic or whatever the case may be, it does come to us. This didn't happen 10 years ago when you didn't have a lot of email activity taking place, but now it's just kind of everyday common events. Maintain a comprehensive list of plans and studies to assist in grant applications. You really kind of have to do that in order to get any money now, especially at the state level. They will not give you money unless you're making a conscious effort to keep your plans up to date and viable. In some cases, towns have had to actually go out and do plans, spend money on plans to be eligible for some funding. And we've been lucky enough over the years just to have the staff and to have the community to come in and do this with us, so we don't have to worry about going out and hiring a lot of people on a regular basis to get this stuff done. So we've been in good shape there. And then finally, pursue innovative approaches and/or policies to reduce the size and cost of government while maintaining services and efficiency. I think we've done that over several years, Rob. We've had a lot of people retire, especially in DPW over the years, and they've been able to do more with less. The technology's helped a lot too. You've got plowing systems now that one man can operate versus two people being in a truck at one time. Computers have been a big help now because you don't have to have secretaries the way you used to have them typing for you constantly. You can do the work yourself. So I think we've done a pretty good job of scaling back a little bit from what we used to be. In certain areas we've hired more people for different things, but that's just because there's a need for those people in that particular area. If that need starts to fade, and certainly as they start to get older and want to retire, they may not be replaced depending on the situation. Then the other big help, I think, is the fact that you've outsourced a lot of the work, particularly mowing grass, that kind of stuff, in the summertime to companies where you don't have to pay a lot of benefits and all that, any benefits for that matter, other than just what their service requirements are for payment. So a lot of stuff has happened over the last 10 years that you never would even thought would have happened prior to that, but it's worked out fairly well. I think we're there. Thanks for putting up with us. We're 15 minutes over, and I apologize for that. But I think we've gotten through this process now. You want to talk a little bit about what the next steps are going to be?
Yeah, so your next scheduled meeting is February 5th. We'll kind of recap where we're at, talk about next steps of where we're going, areas to kind of look into. So I think the next one kind of maybe a planning layout session of what you guys want to look at, where we're going. Who do we want to bring in if you want additional people to come and talk to the group. We talked about having an outside planner come in and talk about some of the national trends for housing, economics, demographics. You know, we can have somebody come in and talk about traffic if we need to, want to. We can have, you know, other groups with that. So next time, maybe kind of a good, planning session to kind of lay out our scope for what we're looking ahead at, start looking at properties around town. Obviously, the golf courses are, very first and foremost, as we have Shadow Pines, currently pending with that group. We'll have updates, from them as they kind of move along, what the recommendations are to the board. And I said, Jim talked as we kind of move into a little bit of the warmer weather, we can look at doing some site tours, driving around town and looking at properties and looking at stretches of roads and looking at areas that, we want to consider some possible future recommendation for rezoning, or, kind of look at, how those neighborhoods are looking, what the vision for the community is moving ahead, so.
And think about who you might want to listen to. We can bring anybody in you want to. We've saved a ton of money by just doing it in-house. So they've given us money to bring people in to talk to you. So if there's anybody of interest to you, whether it's transportation, whether it's just planning, whatever the case may be, let us know. We can put somebody in to satisfy that concern. I want to thank you all for coming. It's nice to see all your faces again. We've had a good run with the ones that are here. I am a little concerned about the lack of attendance. And I guess we're going to have to start calling some people to find out if there are some issues. But we do appreciate the fact that you've been steady and coming to each of the meetings. I've seen the same faces over and over. I appreciate it. With that, why don't you go home to your families and get warm, and see you on the 5th.